Does. Good stuff. Good stuff. So yesterday I was looking at Apple News and they have good stories for the week, which is fun. And there was one that was in particularly really good for me to share with you today. And there was a woman in Oklahoma City, not Oklahoma City, but in the state of Oklahoma, 90-year-old woman who was getting ready for bed, and she looked at her bed, and her bed was in flames. And she tried to put it out herself by throwing blankets and pillows on it, but she was getting disoriented. It wasn't going out, and she actually opened the closet door instead of the door to the bedroom to get out, and she was just disoriented. At the same time, across the street, there were 4 teenage boys, ages 14 to 17, who had just stepped outside and smelled the smoke. Not knowing if she was home, one of them called 911 to get the fire crew out there. Another went to a neighbor to get help and get an axe. Another tried breaking the front door windows out to get in the house, and another went through the back. They all took action very quickly, and the 14-year-old got into the house first, and he saw the woman and scooped her up and got her outside, and they were all fine. And they stayed with her and hugged her until her family could get there and the fire crew got there and put the flames out. But what a wonderful story of courage, which is what we're talking about today, is courage. That these boys had this courage. They just acted. They just went into action, acts of courage. They didn't wait. They didn't say, well, let's see, what should we do? And set an intention. They took action. And so, where does that courage come from? Well, courage is a quality of spirit. Revealing Word, which is one of Unity's metaphysical dictionaries, says this: courage is a spiritual quality that enables one to remain poised and centered in God amidst great difficulties and danger. Well, these boys were certainly in a place of danger with the fire, but most of us don't have physical dangers often in our lives, but we do have difficulties. And it takes courage to step through those difficulties, to walk through them, and follow our path, whatever that is that we're called to follow. It takes courage. And the apostles in the Christian scriptures gave us a great example of how they took courage. In the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, talks about Pentecost Sunday. Today is Pentecost Sunday, which, if you don't know what that is, it's actually considered the birthday of Christianity, the birthday of Judaism. In ancient Jewish history, it's the festival of Shavuot, which means it's the festival of the first fruits harvest. And it's the day when they celebrate the Torah being given to them. And so it's considered their birthday. In Christianity, Pentecost means 50 days after the resurrection. And it's the birthday of Christianity because it's the day when the apostles felt empowered by the Spirit and started preaching the good news. The fruits of the Spirit were upon them. And so in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, it talks about how they were all gathered in this upper room. They were told by Jesus to go stay in this upper room until the Spirit comes. Stay in this high place of consciousness. Stay with these higher thoughts that you're having until you feel filled with the Spirit. And how they felt filled with the Spirit in the story is this big gush of wind starts coming in, blowing in. And then they had little flames of fire above each of their heads. And then they all started speaking in tongues. And because it was this Jewish holiday in Jerusalem, there were lots of Jews gathered for the festival. And all the Jews had different dialects of Greek and Aramaic. And so with the tongues, speaking in tongues, they could understand what the apostles were saying. And Spirit in us is the same. This great wind, this breath, Spirit actually means breath. The word Spirit comes from the same word meaning breath. Have to give life. It's the life-giving force. We have to wake up. The first step is always waking up, asking the question, who am I? And wake up and come into that awareness. Give life with the breath. And then the fire, the flames above the heads. Fire is considered a cleansing. So we want to get rid of all those things that stand in the way of this life force. Those things that weigh us down, that keep us minimalized. And give life. Use our power of zeal. Get enthusiastic. Fire it up. And then the speaking of in the tongues is taking that action. The Spirit is considered the activity of God. We want to take that action. We want to get out and express that which we know to be true of ourselves. And that answers the question, how shall I live? So we've got who am I with the breath. Who do I want to become with the fire, the zeal, and then how shall I live? Our power of power, speaking, standing in our power. It's a threefold process of engaging the Spirit within us. And then have people understand us. Because we're so full of life, we're so full of energy. Robert Brummett calls it a transformational experience. It's the wake up, grow up, and show up. And that's what we need to do. Wake up, grow up, show up. The apostles did this beautifully for us. And then Peter was able to give this speech to all the Jews that were there. They said, oh, they're just drunk. He said, no, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. They're not drunk. They're alive with the Spirit. And it says in the scriptures that he converted 3,000 Jews were converted that day. Meaning 3,000, when we talk about people in the Bible metaphysically, it's our thoughts. We've converted our thoughts. We've gathered our thoughts, all in alignment with what's true for us. It can be very inspiring to know that we have that power within us. It takes courage. It takes courage to take that action, to wake up, to grow up, to show up. T.D. Jakes is a minister at a mega church in Dallas from a non-denominational Christian church. And I ran across one of his videos this week that I want to share with you. He's speaking to a women's convention, which he does once a year. He's done a lot of good in the world through his service. And in 2001, he was on the cover of Time magazine as being one of the most influential speakers, preachers in America. Let's watch the video, Tom.
You gotta have the courage. Do you have the courage to act outwardly on what you see inwardly? Or will you die a dreamer? Will you die on the verge and on the edge and in the land of put up, would up, and should? Do you have the courage?
want to know, in my head, I preach like that. I don't know if I have the courage to do it outwardly. But I love how he says that. Do you have the courage to be outwardly what you know to be true about yourself inwardly? Do you have that courage to express from the Christ that you are? Do we have that courage? That courage is within us. It's within each of us. Whether we know it or not, whether we've used it or not, it's there. William L. Fisher is the Unity minister who wrote this in 1972. If you will constantly remind it's easier not to. It's easier to not make waves. It's easier to just play it safe. It's easier to just go along with the program. So what always happens for me when I'm going to discuss a topic is I get an opportunity to have it appear for me during the week. And I had one of those such opportunities to either go with the flow, go with the status quo, I should say, or go with what was being presented to me as the way to go, or take a stand. One was easy. One was, okay, I'll just do it your way. Another was, no. A few months ago, I was presented with or asked to participate in a planning process for our Unity Convention's ordination and graduation ceremony, which is going to be held next Monday. And I didn't volunteer for this, so my first thought was, oh, you must have sent this to the wrong Sue, because I didn't sign up for this. She's like, no, you've been selected. Well, my observation of last year's ordination and graduation ceremony, it was the first time they had brought all four paths to ordination together into one celebration ceremony. And my observation of last year's was that the program I was in, the field licensing program, was not discussed, was not in the program. There were people there that were getting acknowledged. They got to stand. They got to walk across the stage, but there was no discussion at all about what the field licensing program was all about. Coming from that program, I thought, well, I can be part of this planning process. There's something I can work on with this. So going further into the process, I was asked then to speak as one of the keynote speakers. One of my visions during Prosperity Plus was to speak to a bigger audience. Here's coming. A couple weeks ago, we had our final planning session to finalize things for next Monday. And we were told that there's only one path to ordination, not four. You're not going to talk about the different paths, tracks, they call them. We're not going to talk about that. Those two schools, the Institute and the Urban School, would be discussed. They would talk because they have an actual graduation from a school. And field licensing and international school, you'll get to stand and be acknowledged, but we're not going to talk about it. Now, I have great, great respect for our Unity Worldwide Ministries. I admire the people that work there very much, and I love this organization. It's our credentialing body, it's our educational body, and it's our association. But when I heard that, that it was going to be the same as last year's, and field licensing, by the way, is still not listed in the program. It'll be an insert. That was my dilemma. Do I say, okay, I'll just do whatever you say, tell me what to talk about, or do I say no? It takes courage to send an email to people who you totally respect and totally admire, whose approval you have been wanting to have as you've, going through this ordination program, to send them an email and say, this doesn't work for me. This isn't right for me. This is out of integrity for me. This is my observation of what happened, and I'm going to have to say no. Now, when we do something like that, I hit that send button. You know how when you're if you didn't have fear, you wouldn't need courage. But fear is a chemical reaction in our body. Our palms get sweaty, our heart starts racing, you feel like you're going to throw up. I hit that send button. It's like, okay, you have to release. Once you've done it, you got to release it because there's nothing you can do to change it. And when you stand in your truth, when you stand in your power and come from a place of knowing who you are and what you want to be and how you want to show up, how anybody reacts doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's none of your business how they react to you standing in your truth. That's their business. So I hit the send button. Okay. And I've gotten 4 out of 6 emails back. Supportive, apologizing, a little defensive, understanding, and I think there are going to be some changes to the way they do it. It takes courage to stand in your truth. It takes courage to try different things, breaking out of your patterns. It takes courage to make waves and say, I don't agree with this, in a kind way. I read my email over several times afterwards because that fear, it was a kind email. It was stating the facts. It was stating my observation of things, and I totally respect all of them very much. But it takes courage to do something like that. It takes courage to stand here right now knowing we're on Facebook Live. Anybody want to turn around and have courage and wave to the camera that's up there next to the screen? It takes courage to be on Facebook Live for the first time. So fear. Most of us, I think, don't want to live our lives with fear. Fear holds us back so much. We play small. We don't stand in our truth. We're afraid of making waves. But courage is there, always, available. You take courage. Know that that part of you inside that is longing to express, that wants an expanded, bigger life, can use this courage that you have within. You can use it. Sometimes we need to break it down in smaller pieces, and that's okay. You don't have to take on a big, huge thing right away. Break it down. Sometimes we can fool our bodies to thinking everything's okay when we're afraid by smiling, whether it's fake or not. And sometimes when we have a passion about something, like my passion for the field licensing program, it's gonna push you forward. Take courage. That voice inside of you, listen to that voice inside of you that is the voice of spirit. And you'll know that voice because that voice is not meant to harm anyone. It helps you stand in your truth. Last week, Scott used a quote from Richard Rohr, who's a Jesuit priest and Franciscan, thank you. Priest, and he has a daily blog, and the blog was called The Voice of God, and Janice had sent it to both Scott and I, and he used it. I'm like, darn, I was going to use that the next week. But there's so much in there that it doesn't matter. It's so rich. So I love what he had to say here. Do you have the courage? I know you have the courage. Are you going to use the courage to be who you came here to be? To move beyond that fear and express your full, big, beautiful selves. I invite you this week to have the courage. Use the courage within and share yourself with the world. Namaste.